Sumimasen. Eigo, wakarimaimasu ka? Oh good, you do. I don't have to fumble my way through Japanese for the next 10 to 15 minutes as I try to intricately explain exactly how mental the Yakuza series happens to be. Before I even do that, I need to get to the usual guff. A key was provided for the purposes of a review. The Yakuza series is just magical. It's a special little beast of its own. As I said in the review, it's part spectacle fighter, part of it's a crime thriller, part of it's visual novel, part of it's anime, and, well, it's all completely mental. It all started on the PlayStation 2 in 2005 with Yakuza. It was a magical little beast that didn't get enough PR in the West. At least that's what I'm going to blame it on, because, well, it has Mark Hamill playing Goro Majima before he reprised his role as the Joker. How do you say, oh yeah, here's a man known for playing a nut job, playing a nut job. And then you have everyone from Eliza Dushku, Michael Madsen, Rachel Lee Cook, again Mark Hamill, Alan Dale, just a star-studded cast of here's people from film and TV, and it's in a game, a Japanese game that's beautiful and magical and full of story that is just, it's wonderful. Though that's games in the past. Today I want to talk about a game that released in 2006. Okay, that's still the past. However, Yakuza Kiwami 2, Kiwami meaning extreme, is somewhere between a remaster and a remake of the original 2006 game Yakuza 2, which continued the story and continued to be mental. It is... it's madness. That's all it is. It's complete madness that is beautiful and wonderful, and if you have not played a Yakuza game already, you should. I'm not going to comment on Yakuza 7 because, well, that hasn't released in the West yet, and let's not talk about the turn-based combat that's worrying me. I don't know. I prefer the partly spectacle fighter slash a bit Street Fighter slash a bit just mental that is the Yakuza street fights. They are brilliant and madness, and did I say brilliant? Because that's what they are. On every single street and every single back alley you will fight some men, and they're always random. They're always brilliantly random, whatever it happens to be. You'll fight some Yakuza, you'll fight some delinquents, you'll fight some men in gold suits and a lot of bloody health. And it's all fantastic, because sometimes you'll be protecting a small child that you love to death, because of course you do, you're a man with a heart of gold and a brick for a face. But sometimes you'll just want to rip a man in half and put some fireworks in him and watch him burn. It is the hairy dad game. That's what Yakuza is. Though not the hairy bit, because the hairy bit all starts with The Last of Us. Side note, for every single person that wants to call death threats upon Laura Bailey just because she voiced a character that did a thing to your beloved Joel, who is a twat, fuck up. Just fuck up. Though happy thoughts about the Yakuza, or as the Japanese police would prefer them to be called, Boryo-Katan, or as they themselves would prefer to be called, Ninkyo Dantai. But yes, Kazuma Kiryu, he's just a magical, wonderful man who will look after a child that, yes, there's bits that I'm showing that are from the first game, and I'm trying not to spoil too much, but I'm trying to give a little bit of an overview of here is a bit of the game, and a lot of it is spent reading subtitles because, again, it's in Japanese. In fact, I spent most of my time running around the very Japanese open worlds, which is to say that it's not the Western, here's a whole country of just massive proportions with nothing really interesting to do in it aside from, blow it up. The Japanese like to do this thing where you have a small bit of a city, and in that city you can go in a lot of buildings and there's a lot of detail, and in that there is a lot to do. You can go into restaurants and buy little bits of things and have meals and such and so on. Or you can go into Club Sega and play the UFO catching machines. You can play Virtual Fighter. You can play... what's the other one? I've forgotten it because I haven't really done it. You can play golf. You can play darts. There's a lot that you can do, and you can also go into bars, drink beer. You can... what's the other ones? You can go into Popo and buy sake. It's brilliant. I know it sounds weird that you have all these different stores and such, but honestly, they feel rich. They feel rich with story because you're so ingrained by going to these stores every time. In the city of Osaka, which you visit in this game, though it's a bit of a parody version nonetheless, you have a bit where you have to get a man a knife, and you find a knife somewhere. I think it's a dirty knife that you've stabbed someone with, I can't really remember, and you give the man the knife and he loves it. It's a bit crap, it's a bit nah, but he loves it, and I keep going back to that store because he is lovely. He's a magical little man that is doing something he loves, and now because I gave him something, he loves his job a little bit more. You can go into specific Popo stores, which are convenience stores if you don't know, and they have two men sometimes, and one of them will have a backstory, and because you have to speak to them a couple times just to get through their backstory, you start feeling for them, you start liking them more, so you keep going even though your story is done with them. It's brilliant. There's so much in tiny little things, and every time I am about to leave a store, every time I'm about to leave the pawn shop and a man says arigato gozaimasu ka, I repeat it back. I thank him because he's done something for me and I like him. That's the brilliance of Yakuza. You have all these little bits building to a fantastic world that is full of people that you know and some that you don't, and you bash their face in. It's fucking brilliant. That's what it is. I don't mean that I'm saying these things in game. I'm actually saying these things out loud. Yes, it is a little weird that when someone walks past the room and hears me saying "Gomene" to absolute strangers in a video game, they might think I'm mental, which I am, but it's a fantastic game. The entire series is full of fantastic little narratives that build up to a great world. And that's what I think Yakuza is best at. What Yakuza is not so great at is real-time strategy, which was brought into the series in Yakuza 6. Now, I know I'm talking about Yakuza 2 Kiwami, or Kiwami 2, rather. With Kiwami 2, they brought back in a bit of 6, just to bugger about with bits and pieces. Now, I like Yakuza 6, but I don't really care for the clan creator. That's clan with a C, not K. It's one of those little things that doesn't really add much. It does add a bit to the game, but as an experience, it doesn't bring a bit of excitement. It doesn't bring something that I want to do. It's just something there that's not really fun to interact with. Though, the one thing that it does bring into Kiwami 2 that I do enjoy is a bit of the wrestling. I love the oddity of having Kenjimoto or any of the New Japan wrestlers in the game. It's madness. It is complete and utter madness to have them there, and it's brilliant. I love it. I don't really care for another thing that's brought into the game, but we'll forget about that for a minute. I love it. Seeing Kenjimoto just there in a suit, a bit angry, wants to kill someone, wants to kill me. I can't help but smile. It's madness. That's what Yakuza brings. It's complete and utter fucking madness. However, some of that madness includes a bit of awkward madness for us in the West and something normal in Japan. The hostess clubs and cabaret clubs are different, to say the least. I said it in the review. All of the oddities that I have with it, all of the little bits that I'm reserved on with it, happens to be what men would do in the West with that same thing. In Japan, you have hostess clubs, which are basically just clubs for salarymen to go to and sit to talk with women while getting drunk. Now, most of it is innocence. I know it sounds odd that here's some men drinking and young women dolled up to look nice and wonderful and appealing, but somehow there's innocence in it, and it feels odd to even talk about it, and it did in the review, but it's... In Japan, there's a lot of oddities around sex that we don't have. We don't have the rather reserved feeling around sex. We seem to be going through a liberation of fuck it, let's like everything, and some of that liking everything is spilling into what porn happens to do. And let's not talk about Japanese porn being blurred, because that's going into a dark area that really doesn't need to be talked about here. But in Japan, you have hostess clubs where men pay to sit with women and get a bit drunk and talk about whatever. But there are other clubs that you can pay to talk explicitly with women, and I can see fine bits with that. Hell, I'm fine with prostitution as long as it's legalised and properly done, like Australia seems to do, where you have brothels and people are tested and it's all done correctly. But nonetheless, that's getting sidetracked. The cabaret club always feels a bit... feels like something that we in the West would abuse like nothing else, because, well, you've seen every man on the internet talk about women. Any man above, let's say 25, would say something inappropriate, and any man under the age of 18, yes, rather that, would just shout boobies and, you know, go on. It's odd to think, oh yeah, that's fine. that's all innocent. When in your head you're going, yeah, pervy older men are going to do this. And I'm not saying over 25 is old, I'm just saying that over 25 is leaning into the, oh yes. It's round about that 90s bit where people start thinking, oh, right, let's move a bit towards being less disrespectful to each other. And I know in the 80s they think, oh, they're all a bit hippie and so on. Let's not talk about that. The point is, Yakuza has this system within it where you control a cabaret club and you have to hire young women into working in the cabaret club, and it's all a bit awkward for men in their 20s talking about that, knowing the West and men and old pervy men. Nonetheless, Yakuza Kiwami 2 is great. I love it. I love it to death because it's more Yakuza. It's more Yakuza on the Xbox, which means we're still going to get more and more Yakuza on the Xbox. The 7th game, which is really the 8th game, which is really the 31st game, is also coming. I don't know about Yakuza 6 or 3 through 5, which was the remastered collection through the PlayStation 4. Yes, that's the one, not the 5, which is yet to come. Yakuza is brilliant. It's a brilliant little series that you could spend hundreds and hundreds of hours searching for collectibles, talking to men in stores, doing many different things, and never really getting bored. Yes, you might get a little bit fed up running the same streets over and over again, but it's all charming. It's all a wonderful world that builds up to be somewhere that you like. Yes, it is a bit of a parody, a satire of Japan, much like the Grand Theft Auto series is a parody of, well, modern day America. But Yakuza does it in such a grounded way that if the Yakuza series were to continue in English, voiced English that is, from its first iteration through to its 7th, or really 8th, but let's forget about that, it would feel a little stranger because, well, the groundedness would just fuck off. With an American accent, it all disappears from a grounded yet funny world to grounded but odd. Now, yes, it is an odd world, but it's brilliantly done through its own little bubble. That's what Yakuza is. It's a little bubble of Japanese eccentric entertainment that is just enough of an absurdity to break through, but not too absurd that in English it would work. Because you have to be, let's say, Hideo Kojima to make massive whales on the moon and such feel normal. That would be normal in his world. But in Yakuza, you're so grounded in a reality of liking people, of enjoying the company of people, instead of going, oh, fragile, she's a woman, good. Of course she's fragile. Or, quiet, of course she's quiet, she's a woman, she doesn't need to talk according to you. That's the difference between the absurdity of a Metal Gear or Death Stranding and the Yakuza series. It's done well enough that with the translations and with all that needs to be done to make it work in English, it wouldn't survive. It wouldn't survive with that special little bit of absurdity that it needs to survive and thrive properly. I think I've gone on long enough about Yakuza. It's a brilliant series about bashing someone over the head with a bicycle. I love it. I love it to death. I can't recommend the whole series enough, and I'll probably talk about the third game maybe later on, or the fourth game, or the fifth game, or Zero, or the first, or the sixth, or possibly the seventh at some point, but I think that's enough about 2, which I didn't really talk about any of the story because you need to experience that yourself, and yeah, just go play Yakuza games. They're brilliant. That's all I have to say. Now bugger off to Kamurocho.